Hi, I'm Danielle Davies, and you're listening to Roar, a show that amplifies the voices of women breaking barriers, leading change, and making real impact. Keep listening for bold ideas and stories that inspire you to find your voice and make some noise. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Roar. I'm your host, Danielle Davies. Today's guest knows what it means to take the most personal, even painful experience and turn it into a movement that helps other women. Stephanie Thompson is the founder of Bravemumma, author of The Day My Vagina Broke, and host of the Lowdown with Bravemumma podcast. What began as her own story of birth trauma and pelvic health challenges has grown into a platform that empowers women to make informed choices, break taboos, and possibly most important, know they're not alone. Being brave with her story not only resonated with women everywhere, it also gave Stephanie a whole new career trajectory. These days, she's moved from hosting her own podcast to helping podcasters everywhere identify and build meaningful partnerships with her company, Podcast Expert Lab. In our conversation, we'll explore what it took for her to share so openly, what she's learned along the way, and how she believes more women can start and create change. Welcome, Stephanie.
Welcome. Thank you. That is one of the most beautiful intros I've ever had. I appreciate you.
No, thank you so much. And as you know, because we were just discussing, I'm really excited that you're here for many reasons, but honestly, we're going to just start right at the beginning. And, I always look at life as there are, and I'm sure a lot of people do, there are these before and after moments that are like life-changing and defining. And your book is based on one such life-changing moment, although moment is really a really small way to put what your experience was. Could you talk to us about the experience that led up to you writing your book? Just so everybody has an idea about what we're talking about.
For sure. And I think it can go onto multiple levels, Danielle. So give me a little bit of insight into your audience first. Are we predominantly female mums talking here?
Not all mums, but all women who are interested in different ways to support other women.
Mm-hmm.
And very interested in either advocacy or innovation.
Perfect. Because when you and this is something I've learned, like my daughter's turning 10 this year. So we've been doing this for a decade almost. And I feel like if you can talk to the audience in the right way, it gets received in the right way. Sometimes it doesn't quite hit, and sometimes it does because there is trauma involved. So for example, way back when, they used to tell us to do a trigger warning for people. Yeah. So because you're talking about trauma, now I kind of more preface it as if there's anything in this conversation that comes up for you, not just the particular birthing part itself, just press pause, take a break. Like, this is the beauty of podcasting. Like, it's that simple. Because I feel like sometimes when you preface everything with trauma, people already they get tense, they get the shoulders up, and it's hard to receive how they can take that information and implement it in their own life to help others or themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's great. And yes, I think that's definitely better than the yellow caution tape that we would otherwise have up.
Yes. That is only good when you are speaking to people who are charged with caring for you. So that's the doctors, obstetricians, political side of things, because we have to scare them a little bit for them to take action. If there's no fear involved, like legal action, they just hear you and it goes in one ear and out the other. So they see how there's a time and a place for particular parts of your story and how you tell it for it to have an outcome at the other end. So if we're talking to women here, I'm going to really take the angle of how we don't know our own bodies.
That is a great angle. And also, if you wouldn't mind, and I'm sure you will, touching on the idea of what we don't know about giving birth and we kind of all want to remain blissfully unaware because it is scary. And really, once you're there, there's really no going back. You've got to get through to the other side. And I think a lot of us, I was not even remotely aware of the situation that you had. I had until just a few years ago, I didn't even know what pelvic organ prolapse was, even to a minor degree. So anyway.
100%. And I think, okay, so let's get into it. Are those people like, what are you, stop dancing around the topic? So, so basically I can describe myself as a very driven, I was classed as a geriatric mum. So as a first-time mum, I was 35 years old, had an amazing career, you know, and a triathlete and all of the things that I guess people would say it was an A-type personality. So everything I did was to the nth degree, always raising the bar. So for me, childbirth was, well, I'm going to have the perfect birth. I've seen those videos. I've seen them not even scream and just like breathe the baby down and just take a deep breath and then it just pops out. So
I'm sorry,
I'm laughing at myself.
Right there. I know. No, I remember being like this, the most important thing being what was going to be on the playlist.
And what outfit is the baby going home in?
Right. Very important.
And that is the honest mindset because at the same time we have this, you know, our inner circle of women who don't want to scare you. But here's the truth. I was scared anyway, and I was just pretending not to be by doing breath work or by listening to meditations, but it was all masking. Because ultimately now in the 10 years that I've done a lot of healing and a lot of work, it came up about 3 years ago. I was scared she was going to die, but I never told anyone. I had this thing that in childbirth, she wasn't going to make it. And so I carried that silently. And I think that made my body so tense. Plus being an athlete. So these are the things I've learned after the fact. Being an athlete would have led to me having a very tight pelvic floor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To have a baby, you need your pelvic floor to move with breath, like literally stretch and move and stretch and move. But if you are tense, it's like a rock and it doesn't move. So the baby can't move. So then the baby gets stuck.
Oh.
So all of these factors led to the cascade of events that you know was classed as a traumatic birth. And what I want to say about that now is, having gone through it and healed, I probably wouldn't use that same word as what I did even 6 years ago, because trauma is just how you felt about it at the time.
Okay.
Now I would class it as a complicated birth because I had to have intervention. I think it's important to have this little umbrella here. I wanted natural birth, and I'm using inverted commas for those who are not watching, because that's what I was told and sold is the best method to birth your baby. Here in Australia, cesarean section birth is not an option. It's only for emergency, or if you are paying a private obstetrician. So if you're in the public system and you have a baby, there was actually government policy called Towards Normal Birth, and they made the women push the babies out at whatever cost. So I was the result of that government policy that led me to push my daughter for way too long. They let it go too long, and I didn't know, because I thought I was educated in what I needed to know, like the playlist, the candles, the baby outfit, all the best bottles to use, etc. I didn't even know the mechanics of my own body. So when they were saying push, I'm like, I am, but I wasn't. Or when they were saying do this, do that, I'm like, I'm doing it. But I was so delusional, exhausted, like mentally, I think they call it maternal exhaustion. I couldn't even stand. My legs were shaking so much. What I learned was she was posterior. So she was facing the wrong way. Her chin kept getting stuck. So as she's trying to get down and she's stuck, and they then tried to vacuum her, but it failed 4 times.
That's what I was going to say, 4 times, right?
Legally, they're meant to have 2 goes and that's it. On the 4th time, it actually ripped her scalp off her head and deformed her scalp. So even now she has this epic, they're called a kiwi cup, shaped head. She's got a big lump on her head. And So when that failed the fourth time, look, remembering things from so long ago it's almost like you remember how you've retold it. So I remember them saying something like, I just need to do a little snip, like an episiotomy, which I didn't really know what it was either. And I'm saying this because as an educated woman, I felt very blindsided by that. I was like, why didn't I know what that was? Why did I know what this was, but not that? Like I was missing a whole half of childbirth education that I just didn't have access to. And then over the years, people have said, well, why didn't you ask? I'm like, I didn't even know what the word was to ask.
Exactly. I was going to say, I think that it's interesting. I knew what an episiotomy was because I was in the room helping deliver a baby and somebody needed one. And by helping, I mean standing there helplessly holding someone's hand. But I didn't know that. And those aren't conversations that anybody, and I'm here in the US and I'm sure there are differences and there are similarities. But the thing is, I think overwhelmingly we find that doctors, through no fault of their own, are tasked with something that happens every day, but it doesn't make it easy. It is a high risk endeavor, and they're doing their best to kind of kindly placate us so we don't completely lose our minds. And because I think I would completely lose my mind. Just I can remember there used to be a TV show here in the US called The Birth Story or The Baby Story. And it was on the Learning Channel. There were actual births and people would follow these women. And I remember watching one time and I was pregnant and I was like sobbing and I ran up to my husband. I'm like, there's no way I can do I take it back. Like, there's no way I can do this. And, the answer was, of course you can. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And it isn't always fine. And we don't even have the language. It actually does make you feel less educated than you would normally feel because you're so in the dark.
You are. And this is the problem.
That's
and even through the research in my book, surprisingly, I found because in our particular states, there's different childbirth resources. One of them didn't even have the word episiotomy. It had like an A to Z of words and topics in childbirth. And I remember I still have it printed. In the E, episiotomy is missing, yet it's really commonly, routinely used to help babies come out. So they cut from front to back to try and give it space for her to come out. And all through this natural childbirth education, they also tell you don't need pain medication. So all of this was happening with zero pain medication, okay? Because they also make you think, it's like that breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, formula feeding. They pitted against each other. So vaginal childbirth and cesarean childbirth are pitted against each other, that one is better than the other. Remembering I wanted to be the best. Right. And the best was vaginal childbirth. That's what we were always being told. It's so good for your baby. It gets all the natural and yada, yada, yada.
Oh, absolutely. That's absolutely. That's the gold standard. And without drugs, without medication, without treatment, that's the gold standard.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
My private birthing classes actually said, you just have to visualize breathing the baby down and your vagina opening like a lotus flower, and she would just float on out. I was like, okay, I can do that. Until I couldn't do that.
Right. It sounds lovely.
So in the moment, not only are you struggling, but you're also feeling like you're failing at it because you're not doing it enough. Like it was just this lack of enoughness. Like, why can't I get this? Which obviously in turn, which we know now, makes you even more tense. Your body even goes even tighter. So I think at this point, this is like over 35 hours. So this is very abridged version. The decision was made to get her out using forceps. Now, this is where the story really begins, because this is my life now is because of this. The use of forceps and rotating her ripped, like basically they put them in, they turned her the right way. She came out. She was alive. we were just stunned, actually. Do you know when a baby comes out, usually the parents go, oh my God, and then they cry. We were both silent. My husband and I were just like, what was that?
Like, is it over? Please.
Yeah. Is she alive? Like, what the hell? Oh. Anyway. So then, because the whole time they were saying, I kept saying, is something wrong with her? Like, why are we going from a room of candles and my midwife to a room full of people and lights on? Like, no, she's fine. Well, I don't believe you. I don't believe what anyone is saying, and I've lost trust in
Especially after 35 hours. I mean, it's not like a minor adjustment. That is a long time. You would be hallucinating if you weren't giving birth.
Yeah.
Disorienting and awful. Yeah. Sorry.
So then when this again, all of this I only found out months and years after the fact. No one even told me any of this as I left the hospital. The rotation of the forceps tore the pelvic floor muscle off the bone, which means that now no matter how many Kegels or pelvic floor physios I see, you can't reattach it to the bone, so you can't strengthen one whole side and partially the other side. I left the delivery suite in a wheelchair and they sent me home the next day. So I had stitches from front to back, 3 layers of stitches that, when you think about it, because it's from the opening of your vagina through to your anus. That's the episiotomy, front to back. That is where you sit. And when you have that many stitches, it's really hard to walk around. You've just given birth. You have this new baby. It got infected really bad. And I said to my midwife, because they were coming to the house every day, I'm like, something doesn't feel right. And just that whole, you'll be fine. It's okay. You're just a new mom. You're a warrior. You panic too much.
I have a question. If it had not gotten infected, it already would have been irreparable damage. So they basically just adding insult to injury by letting this get infected. And somebody coming to you every day and nobody believing you.
Well, I said to her at one point, I can smell it. Like, and because of the generation we grew up in, Danielle, you never really looked down there. It was taboo. Yep. I remember one day I got my camera out and I was like, I need to see. Something is not right. And I looked and I was like, oh my God, they're so stupid. There's another baby there. I can see that, like this round pink bulge in my vagina. It looked like a baby's head crowning. And of course, sleep deprivation, just gone through all that. We rang and told them, and they were kind of a bit very dismissive, a little bit giggly, like, no, that's not a baby, dude. They're there, you know.
But still, it's so abnormal, especially for you. I mean, anybody this happens to, unless they were born like this, it's abnormal. It's your body has at least experienced trauma, right? It's experienced something enormous, something tearing or breaking or injured, and it's not looking or performing in the way that it did. I mean, I get that they would probably be like, no, there's not another baby. You know, you'd hear a heartbeat, things like this. You know, when I was reading your book, I was like, oh my God, because I didn't know how it happened yet. You know, I didn't get to the outcome, and I realized you haven't either, and I'm jumping the gun. But I was like, is it your placenta? Like, I'm like, did they leave in her placenta?
Oh, yeah.
Because I was like, what is it? I know, you know, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think at the end of that conversation, like, I was in the bathroom hysterical. My husband was holding a crying baby and on the phone to the midwife through the door. I wouldn't let him come in. I was horrified. I was embarrassed. I had a lot of shame. And then he was saying to me, she said, it's okay, it's fine. And I remember yelling through the door, I am not effing fine. This is not fine. This is not okay. And the midwife said, well, if she's that worried, go to the GP, go to the doctor. So the next day I did, because this was in the nighttime. The next day I went to the doctor and he just looked at me and he said, he was looking between my legs and he said, oh, darling, what did they do to you? I was black and blue with bruises. My GP said that to me.
And is this is because of the birth itself, or is this also added because of the infection?
Just the bruising was from the birth. And then he said, yes, your stitches are highly infected. We need to rush you back to hospital to have them undone, cleaned, and restitched under anesthetic.
Oh my God. Thank God. I'm like, at least, please, at least take the pain away for that part. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
They did send me to the hospital, and luckily I met this obstetrician who was just that light in shining armor, I guess. He had a good look and he said, okay, I think we can clear this up in 2 days, but you need to do these protocols, like two lots of antibiotics. He said, because if you go under anesthetic right now, these are the risks and benefits. One of the risks was the ability to breastfeed for days.
Okay.
And of course, I was that perfect high achieving mum. I had to breastfeed. You look at all that now and you think, oh my God, that poor girl was put through so much to believe that there's only one way to be a good mum. And that's just all garbage. We now know that. So then when it got to day 3, I think it was actually clearing up. And this is the hard thing, because one midwife would say, have a salt bath. The other one would say, do not have a salt bath because the stitches will erode. One person would say, use a hairdryer after the shower, like don't touch it, but use a hairdryer. The other one would say, don't use a hairdryer because you'll inevitably blow bacteria back into it. So you just had this push-pull between the people you were meant to trust, and they were a team. It's a midwife team, and they couldn't even work out which direction to help me. So it was a mess. I was a mess.
Like the most vulnerable time of any new mom's life, having a newborn baby, if it goes swimmingly well, is still completely challenging. It's still totally overwhelming, and you cry. It's a huge life change, but you're also going through like this really intimate problem. You don't know what it is. And I think it's just astounding how it almost appears to me how you wrote your way through it. And I keep interjecting in your story, but I will let you continue.
No, I love it. It's good. It's good to be able to just also take a minute, because when you're reliving it after so long, you do want to make sure it's going to be shared in the most impactful way that can help people.
Absolutely.
So the whole idea is not to scare women. And this is something I learned throughout the process. You know how you said just before that you saw a birthing video when you were pregnant?
Yes.
It needs to happen before you get pregnant.
Yes.
Not when the emotions are there and you feel trapped in you don't have a decision or you don't have any agency, because you knew your baby had to come out, right? But in that process, while you're watching something like that, it is helpful to have someone to say, I'm scared about that. And they say, good, tell me more. And then you talk through your fear. Okay, good, tell me more. And you actually get to unpack those fears about why are you activated when you saw that. That gets you in a much better place and become more educated as to, okay, when I'm in birth, if I feel this, I can do that.
Yes. That would make you, and also knowing, because it's so foreign to so many of us, I always think about women who've had like many, many children. My grandmother had 8 children. And I think, by the last one, she probably was, my aunt actually tells the story that she came home, carried the baby up the stairs, way down a hall, put him in a crib, and then came downstairs and made like sandwiches for the whole other 7 kids. Like it was just, she was in the hospital longer because they did that then, but it was so routine for her, I guess, to have all of those children. For most people, or at least everyone that's had a first child, you don't know what to expect. It's no matter what, it's going to be frightening because you're in a vulnerable position trying to make sure you're alive, the baby's alive, and you don't know what to expect, and nobody's communicated. It's just profoundly scary. And I think that it doesn't have to be as frightening as it is.
Agreed. I don't think we need to treat women like idiots. I don't think we have to, in that mask of trying to protect them and not scare them. That's garbage. We're scared about a million things and get through it. It's all about not thinking that we can't handle it. We can handle so many things. And so from there, so my best friend was an RN, and I rang her crying, and she came over. Actually, before she came over, she said, "It sounds like you might have a prolapse." And I was like, "A what? A pro what? A what?" I had no idea. So basically that bulge that I thought was my child's twin, hideous thought, which I now can laugh at. I feel for that poor mum back then, that sleep deprivation, the hormones, all the things. I see her. It was a real thing. That pink thing that looks like a head was actually my vaginal canal collapsing on itself because my bladder, bowel, uterus can no longer stay in the hammock of the pelvic floor. Because remember, it was torn off the bone. So that was
right. Okay.
They slid down, and even for a little while there, I was telling people that my bladder was hanging out of my vagina, but it's actually not. It's the vaginal canal. It's just pushing, like it's pushing the wall. It's hard to describe it. You almost need like a sock, like a visual. I wish people would come up with, and I probably will in the near future, like an infographic or an animation to show people what it actually is.
Because it's not, also, you have a profound, this has affected you profoundly, but you could have a mild prolapse, correct? I mean, and
four
you don't even know.
Stages.
Okay. Because I know, and I literally just last year learned the word pessary, so I didn't even know. And I'm sure there are women listening to this who are like, but please tell us what that is. And my impression of it is almost like it is a little hammock. Is that correct? The pessary?
It's a silicon object that's inserted into the vagina to try and hold it up. So it acts as the sling at the top.
Okay.
Okay. So let's rewind a little bit.
Yes, please.
So I was diagnosed with a pelvic organ prolapse. To add, insult to injury, the amount of surgeons, doctors, urodynamics specialists, all the things that we saw over the next few years, we had 4 different diagnoses. So anywhere from a stage 3 to stage 2 with, it's technical, but with bilateral, so both side avulsions, that's the muscle torn off the bone.
Okay.
The people who assess you do it very differently. Some do it standing up, most do it lying down. With gravity though, when you lay down, it doesn't fall out of the vaginal canal. It's only when you stand up. So protocols around that are thankfully changing. So yes, you're right. Most women who used to have a stage 1 prolapse wouldn't even know. They don't even feel it. Maybe by stage 2 and 3, you can feel it. Heaviness, dragging, potentially something at the opening. They describe it like a tampon feeling, like a tampon falling out.
Okay. That's a good way. I would imagine that's a good way to describe it, because that's like a very specific feeling,
Yeah. And I think generally speaking, this is just from my education along the way. So I'm no expert. I'm not a medical professional. But from stage 1 and 2, generally you can reverse that with pelvic floor physiotherapy, doing things in your lifestyle to help you. For some people who have like chest and health conditions, consistent coughing can cause a prolapse. Obviously, pregnancy and childbirth are the major contributing factors, but women without children have prolapse.
Okay.
Chronic constipation as a child can also lead as a contributing factor. They do recommend weight loss for some women, the weight of it bearing down, probably because that also is not good gut health. when you think about it. It's probably more like constipation or something like that. So there's lots of contributing factors so okay, here you go. 1 in 2 women, so 50% of our population, 50% of our female population will experience pelvic organ prolapse within their lifetime. Yeah, your face has got shock. And that's only the recorded. I'm sure it's much higher. But because of the taboo and shame, women like your grandma after 8 children probably lived with a stage 3 or 4 prolapse in her underpants and never said a word. And it was just like, oh, that's just part of childbirth. That's just part of being a mum.
And the fact that it's that common and that many women have had this or have this condition at some point in their lives, and yet it took until I was in my 40s to even hear about it is crazy. I did do an interview with a pelvic floor physical therapist last season, and we were talking about, she's like, a lot of people don't hear about it, all the time, but the fact that you've actually given birth and never heard about it is a little bit odd. And I was like, I don't think I'm the only one. I don't think everybody knows what this is, and I just was the only one. I think it's more common than you'd think to not have any clue what this is.
So many pelvic floor physiotherapists have to triage the emotional baggage that comes with diagnosing a prolapse because so many women have zero clue. They don't know the word. They don't understand what it means. They then blame themselves, like, how could I have prevented this? But then when you realize it's all these contributing factors that lead to prolapse, sometimes there's not a lot we can be doing.
Quick pause to invite you into the Roar community. Roar is all about amplifying women's voices, and you can be part of it. I share the messy, unfiltered, behind-the-scenes stuff in my emails, things you won't hear anywhere else. Sign up at listenToRoar.com and get in on the real talk. And hey, if this episode hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, drop a comment, or pass it to that one friend who needs to hear it. Every share helps bring more women's stories into the spotlight. All right, let's get back to the episode. And is there anything that you've learned? And in your particular case, we know that it was something very specific that caused it.
Well, yes and no, Danielle. Yes, I had 100% blamed the forceps, the childbirth, the trauma, the delayed labor, all of those things at the time. As the years have gone on and I've better educated myself, pardon me, leading up to the birth, there was probably a degree of prolapse maybe already there. Because I was an athlete, because I had chronic coughing and constipation during chemotherapy, because I had all of these things leading up to before I was even pregnant, I probably had a bit of pelvic floor weakness as well because I used to have incontinence during races.
Okay.
And it was just dismissed as being, well, that's part of being an athlete. You wet your pants a little bit. It's okay. But it's not okay. And it's not normal.
I have to ask you a question. This is nowhere near where I was going to ask you, but is that in your research now, and I know you're not a medical professional, but definitely well-researched on this subject.
Lived experience.
It says a lot. Have you learned about things people can do if they are in those situations? I have a daughter in high school there. I'm sure there are athletes, even her age, that probably are having these little things and they're not thinking anything of it. They're hearing what you heard. Oh, you're an athlete or this or that, just things that you're being made to feel like this is normal when it's a real problem and it might have a fix. Do you have recommendations for people, or are there things that people can do if they're at that kind of a stage?
I think the safest way to answer this is what I would have done differently.
Okay.
Is before I was pregnant, I would have had a full pelvic health assessment by a professional. I would have gone to a physical floor therapist, PT, and I would have asked them to tell me what type of condition my pelvic floor was in. Because if it was tight because of running, they can do a manual release to soften. So things that I've learned like that, I would have really appreciated that. And then I would have continued that during my pregnancy and birth. 100%. So I think that's the best way to do it is I would have seen someone much earlier.
And at the time, did you even know there was someone to see? Didn't you? I mean, I didn't know there were pelvic disease.
I went to the physio for my shoulders or my knee or my ankle, but never the most important part of my body that was showing me signs that something probably wasn't quite right. I didn't know.
Okay, I'm going to go forward. Because first of all, you write this book, and it's since then that you've even learned even more. But before we get to that, before we get to what happens after the book, I've written articles I've written a lot of articles for a lot of magazines and newspapers, but I've also written some pieces that are a little more personal. And when those come out, there's always a little bit of anxiety, like, ooh, somebody knows my personal stuff. And I not just by accident, I hit publish, like I did this. What was the reaction? What did you hear from women when you let this? Because your book it's intimate. You go into detail. You're very brave, and you share the things you didn't know. You share what you wish you knew. It's all a very vulnerable time. And even though it's years from, I guess, from the birth to when you wrote the book, it's a few years.
It was
right there. I mean, you can tell those kids are new. they're not 20. You can tell.
I think we had 2 under 2 when I wrote that book.
They were young. It wasn't, you were not hugely removed from what had happened. So what was the reaction? I'm guessing based on the trajectory of where you went next, that it was pretty positive, but how did you feel putting that out in the world?
Okay, so I think it's really helpful to share this story then. With 2 kids under 2, I was struggling physically every day because I'd been through this process of I was not a candidate for surgery to have the pelvic floor fixed or reattached because mesh has been banned here in Australia. They used to insert mesh. There was a massive lawsuit in America, Johnson & Johnson.
Okay.
So they no longer use it at all. That would have been the fix per se. Pelvic floor physio helped strengthen everything else, but it was never going to reattach the muscle. So I had to learn how to live with this. On top of that, no pessary throughout those entire years up until last year would ever stay in because there was no shelf. There was nowhere for it to be. So it would just slide out and be in my underpants. It was horrendous. So I had to learn how to reinvent myself as a human, as a mum, as a wife, and my career, all at the same time. So as you can imagine, I also numbed the pain with alcohol. Like I don't drink anymore. I do not at all. But at the time, it led to me having a breakdown. I think we had a big night of drinking the night before. My husband was away for work. I'd gone to, and going to the bathroom is really difficult with a prolapse. So you spend a lot of time in there. I was in the toilet. I came out. I had my 2 kids in the kitchen. They'd just tipped an entire new box of cornflakes all over the floor and then put honey on top. The whole thing on the floor. I took a photo of it actually because I just sat there on the floor crying with them. I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I can't, because one key thing I forgot to mention, the whole time this was happening on the outside world, we were brand new parents loving life. Oh my God, we are the parents. We're walking, we're doing the thing. On the inside,
we're walking, because even that was hurting you. But you're like, here we are, we're walking. And you talk about your Disney photo too in the book.
Yeah. It's the things we had to do in the back end for people to see who we were at the front end was such a lie. We were portraying this happy little family, and inside it was painful every day. So at that moment, I was scrolling on my phone. I was on the kitchen floor with the kids. I was like, I don't even know how to clean this up. I can't. It was insane. I was scrolling and I saw a mentor that I had used before he did this panning shot. He was in Bali at the beach and he's like, hey, folks, I'm doing an author's retreat. Look how amazing this is. And I was like, I need to be there. I don't know why. I'm not writing a book, but I just want to be there. Within 3 days, I was in Bali, landed, and I said to him, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't want to write a book. Like, I was just kind of laughing. I just had to tell my husband, just trust me, I just need to go. And we'd worked through an author's workshop for Authors Academy, I think it's called, because it's an intense week. You'd learn how to write a book in the day, and at night you would write. So picture this, I'm in my hotel room and I started writing. I started crying. Like, I couldn't stop. It was just like this flood of tears, and I wasn't like, I'm crying. It was like just watering. It was just all coming out, all of the bravado, all of the facade that we were happy families. It was really raw, and I was like, okay, I know I have to write this book. At the same time, we had just been through the hospital. We were going to be part of a class action to sue the hospital because the level of care, the duty of care legally was not to standard. And this was all things that this law firm were telling me. Basically, we'd gotten to the point where they said, if you continue and you lose, they could take your house to pay the fees. If you win, they will probably throw a small bucket of money at you, but then that's it. You have to never speak of it again. And I was like, oh, this is a conundrum. Pardon me.
That's like a no-win situation.
Right? And I was like, hang on a minute. If I was blindsided like this in my birth and we go through this, the same thing going to happen to Elsie? No, it's not on my watch. So we pushed back the lawsuit, still paying off all their fees, and decided to write the book because I thought we have to change this. This has to change. This is not right. The social justice in me was like, this has to be different for her. There's no way I'm allowing her to go through what I went through, knowing what I went through, just to repeat itself. If our mums and our grandmas also went through this and didn't tell us, what a disservice to us as people birthing babies, right?
Absolutely.
So I wrote the book, and it was the most cathartic process ever because I started finding the words that I couldn't physically say out of my mouth to people about what happened because I was pretending it all was fine. The hospital kept telling me, you're fine, you're fine. I'm like, I'm fine. Walking around saying I'm fine. But on the inside, I was not fine. Physically, mentally, emotionally, I was not fine. The book allowed me to share those moments of me not being fine and then put that layer of hope on how could I be different to this? Like, what do I need to do to not feel like I'm living in a total lie? How can I tell my dad that my vagina is broken and I need him to lift the pram into the car? The book gave me those words, even to say to my husband, it is 3:00 in the afternoon. I can no longer stand. Tag, you're in. My pain level, I created this pain scale from 0 to 10. He knew once it got past 6, 7, he's in, I'm out. So they're all the things that the book helped me develop.
And did it help you even with your community, your friends? I'm guessing if you couldn't say it to your husband, it wasn't like you were telling the women that you run into at the supermarket,
I told no one.
Right. It's not. So here you are, then there's a book.
So I was never going to publish it. I just wanted it to be, dear diary, this really shitty thing happened. The end. I'm good. Thank you. And it was my husband that said to me, why are you going through all of this and then going to keep it a secret? You won't change childbirth unless you put it out there. And that's where Bravemumma was born, because Mama was my grandma. I had to be really brave. It's not who I was. I definitely would never even have said the word vagina before this book, ever. Quite prudish, You don't talk about those things.
I just want to tell you that I cannot relate to this, what you're saying more. And that actually I was married for 5 years. Well, I was with my husband the time I was 23 till 31 for a long time before he was, we were married for some of that. We were dating for part of that before I found out I was pregnant with my first child. And when we told my parents, I actually had to leave the room because I was like, oh my God, I cannot even, I can't even. I can't let them know. I can't let them know, which is something they obviously knew, that I was so uncomfortable. I just wasn't raised to have these conversations out loud. This was private, and that was that. And so when you're saying, how could you tell your dad? I'm like, well, you couldn't. You'd have to.
I couldn't.
I mean,
I actually couldn't even tell my mom, and that's really sad. Or my sister. So when the book was released, I had the people in my mother's group say to me, why didn't you tell us? We're so sorry. We could have done more. My sister say to me, when the hell did that happen? We didn't see that. We didn't know that. And then almost a little bit of frustration from their point. And now I get that because they couldn't come in and support more because we weren't allowing anyone in. We were just battling through on our own.
Which I can see, but I also you can see both perspectives as,
you can now.
Yeah. But I think it was so brave of you to do, but that's not all you did. So you wrote the book, but then you went on to do something else and you created an entire community. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it almost came organically. And I know that word is overused, but it's genuinely true in this instance because I put the book out there and right, done. I fixed childbirth. Not going to happen to Elsie. I'm done. I'm good. And then you get this. Yes. And then
we're good.
And then and then it's crickets. It's silence. You're like, what? And then I would get these DMs on Facebook because obviously I needed to promote the book. You write a book, you need to sell the book. It's never going to get you a Ferrari in the driveway, but it does. I was at the same time, remember, I couldn't go back to my 6-figure career.
Right.
So I was trying to reinvent myself and thinking, well, if I could sell a book, I could maybe still contribute to the family or to the immense expenses I was going through for physical therapy, all the pessaries I tried, all the appointments come with a big price tag. So that's what I thought. And then 2 things happen. You never get rich selling a book or you can't even pay a bill selling books. And it did not change childbirth. So I was really disappointed. I was like, damn it. What I did realize, and this is the organic part, by putting it on Instagram, people started DMing me, meaning women and new moms saying, this happened to me too. Oh my God, how did we, what? And this was my story and the same things and the similar, some of them were almost verbatim. This happened first. Then I'm like, okay, this is systemic. And that's when I found the government policy that states to basically make women push until something happens. Do not let them have cesarean. Cesarean sections are expensive. So then I was like, right, I dug my heels in and I realized we actually needed to have these taboo conversations because if you are not having them within your inner circle of your sister and your mom, who can you have them with? Hence the birth of the podcast, The Lowdown with Bravemumma, because I was like, we need to start talking. If you want action, you need to talk. That's when the podcast came out and I allowed people to hear and feel seen, heard, and supported to know that they weren't alone. And these things are really, really common. I never use the word normal. It's not normal to go through that. It's just common. If we don't keep talking about it, if we don't advocate, it's going to remain super common. One thing I want to share with you, if that's okay, that I'm most proud of. Here in Australia, this all led to a birth trauma inquiry from our government to take a look under the hood as to what this policy was doing. The policy has been updated and changed. Could still do more in my opinion, but it was a start. So the book was the seed of change that needed to happen. Beyond the book, other conversations we have in the podcast. And at the same time, we created a Facebook community, which is now hitting nearly 5,000 women globally who are all living with pelvic organ prolapse. And it allows them to have a safe space to talk to other people who have it. Because quite often, for example, obviously full privacy, not naming anyone, but someone has just experienced immense pain getting a pessary fitting from their GP. If the GP is a male and they've never lived with a prolapse, unless they're exceptional, please go and see a pelvic floor physiotherapist or an obstetrician who understands the mechanics of a vagina. GPs are general practice, like they put the G in general. They're not specialized. You need to have the care and support of a specialist when you're dealing with this.
How has the community itself resonated with other women? Or is it now, I mean, I know it, so it starts off, it's very you-centered. It's your book, it's your story. It is kind of the impetus and the seed for this. But now it almost seems like it's something, I read on your Facebook page, you know, there's moderators, so that it's grown into its own entity. What's
it is.
The feedback that you're getting from other women who are a part of this?
It's funny because I'm actually took a step back from everything in it, because sometimes living in trauma space, it's difficult to remain there when you are trying to heal on many different levels and you get pulled back in. I'm a big feeler, Danielle. Every time I get a DM with a birthing story, I think about that mum for days and weeks. When it's 5 a day, it naturally affects who I am with my kids in my life. I get down easily and I want to fix everyone and I want to help the world. So I had to put a layer of protection at some point to be able to move forward. And this is why we have our team of moderators to support. I was just in there the other day and the women in there that is, anywhere from 90 years old down to 19. So there's a full gamut of aged women, menopause, premenopause, birth, all the things, saying thank you for this space. It's exactly what I needed. I didn't have anywhere to go. I couldn't even, similar to us, they couldn't even tell their friends.
It's astonishing too, because, you know, even when you're saying go get a pessary fitted or by a man or either a specialist or a woman, somebody who understands the mechanics of a vagina, that seems like the kind of space where, you know, you're not dispensing medical advice, but you are a community. It's people talking and getting advice, just like any kind of issue that you might have, whether it's, you know, a class reunion or your neighborhood watch on Facebook. It's that group of women able to kind of give each other their lived experience type of advice.
Yes, because even if a doctor, and that's a really big generalization, by the way, I don't mean that all males are not going to be able to support you. And I just want to preface that because my male obstetrician for my second birth was phenomenal.
That's awesome. No, and there are great, but I would say if you think it's not getting better, try another direction.
100%. And so I do think that once it, I lost my train of thought because we were just talking. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
That's okay, because I've also lost mine. So I'm going to pivot.
This is perimenopause now, isn't it? Hello.
Well, that is one of the things I was going to mention that I recently helped host. I don't know if you have it. I helped moderate like a panel. It was, I guess, in November. So it wasn't that recent, almost a year ago, but it was about menopause. And what is the movie? There's a big movie. It's a documentary about menopause.
See?
Kind of going all worldwide. It's by Thompson, and it's a great documentary about all the things we don't know about our bodies and all the things that were sort of poo-pooed or I'm just going to give you a completely random example. I've had hip pain for 2 years. I've gone to the orthopedic surgeon. I've gone to physical therapy. I've taken Advil. I've slept in different positions. I've done all this stuff. It took very recently with an OBGYN who's like, well, that's very often a menopause symptom. And I'm like, what?
What?
Well, I mean, it would have saved me. I'm looking up Lyme disease. I was looking up bone cancer. I'm like, I'm in so much pain that my mind is just spiraling without just, women's lived experience is really important, especially when our research, and I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the US, we're woefully behind in women's health research compared to men's. Which brings me to underrepresentation. And what I wanted to ask you is, why do you think these things are so underrepresented? Women's health, birth, any type of, because I don't, it's funny. When I started this podcast, I was like working in femtech. Are you familiar with the term femtech? Because I'll just, for anybody who doesn't know, it's sort of the overarching umbrella term for women's healthcare, which is sort of silly, but it started out with like period trackers and stuff on your phone, a digital component. And now a lot of things are under femtech that maybe don't even know that they're under femtech. But, and why am I saying this? Oh, and I was going to interview somebody was like, well, you should just interview founders of femtech things. And I was like, but it's not just health. It's not just health where women are underrepresented. I'm like, it's politics, it's art, it's this. And so therefore now I just talk to women who are innovating in some way to make the lives better for other women. But there's so much underrepresentation. So I was just curious what you see personally from your lived experience as kind of that gap there. Is it more training for midwives? Is it more training? Is it like a political level thing? What you've talked about the bill? Is it, or the law? Is it more soon to be moms? Is it a combination of all of those? Where do you personally feel like the work has to go?
It's multifaceted. You're right. There's not one area. If I could talk to number one, research in pelvic organ prolapse is not sexy. It's longitudinal. And so most researchers and fellows, they want to do their research. They want to get in. What is this throat thing?
It's completely catching all the way across the ocean because I'm doing it.
Buzz. The research is not sexy. For a fellow to do research on pelvic organ prolapse, it's a minimum of 10 years. I have been told that researchers don't want that time frame. They want they want to go in, they want to fix it, they want to prove it and then move on. So research in women's health is also a gender issue because as you said, we put more research dollars into blue pills for men's erectile dysfunction and all the things. The government here in Australia actually covers men's pelvic health things way more than women's pelvic health. So if I need to go and see a urogynecologist, I have to pay like $350 and all the things. But I think it's shifting thanks to women talking about it. The next layer is I gave a keynote to a room full of midwives, and then the entire 8-hour journey home couldn't stop thinking about how could I have done that better. I told my story. And I thought at the end, why did I want to tell them that? Because they're stuck in the middle between the government policy and the people they're trying to support the best they can. I actually think it's their education. So it's not them per se, like you said, the training and education around pelvic floor, like the mechanics of it, I think would be a lot more helpful. I spoke to a physiotherapist and she said pelvic floor in their education, they get about a day. That's it. You have to go and train after being a 4-year physiotherapist, education to learn specific pelvic floor physiotherapy.
They get a day.
Yeah. Or it's a subject. Don't quote me on that, but it's minimal. Like it's nothing compared to the entire learning about how to be a physiotherapist. So that needs to shift because we shouldn't have to make people train on top of something special and have to go back and through it because that's not it's not really an incentive to have to go back and learn again about pelvic floor, right?
Right, especially if it's another 10 years to, there is no incentive.
Give people a pathway. Do you want to treat the general public? Do you want to treat pelvic floor and let them do their thing? Anyway, that's my opinion. I also think it's the conversations we have at our table with the women who we trust. We're not having those. Because we're not giving ourselves time to do that anymore. We're not sitting around with a pot of tea anymore. It's a takeaway coffee, espresso, quick. Move on to the next thing. We're not giving ourselves permission to just sit and be with other women and get to that layer of conversation that goes beyond the, hi, how are you? Yeah, good, how are you? When's your baby due? Oh, da. And it stays at that surface level.
That is really interesting and also so true as we get, I feel like we're further and further away from sharing a pot of tea and all the things that we're, all the great things that came about with the advent of the internet. And look at this, look what we can do. I mean, there are great developments and that is amazing, but the things we've lost are, I think we're just starting to, it's like the tip of the iceberg, what we're realizing, what we've lost. In terms of what you shared and even how you're saying these conversations, I think it takes, besides your comfort, it still takes a lot of bravery to be that vulnerable, to share your intimate details. You didn't know when you wrote the book. You could very well have been like, I wrote this and people are like, I don't know what the heck she's talking about. I never heard of this before in my life. I mean, it could have remained crickets. It could have, those 4.5 thousand women, almost 5,000 women that are in your group now, what if they didn't exist? It still benefited you to go out there and to share this. Do you have any advice for women who feel they have a story to share, but feel like it's either too much? There's always women who are too much or too personal, that are just afraid of being that vulnerable.
I think there's a lot. I'd say the majority of women in that group would not have the courage to talk about this outside the group. So they certainly wouldn't write a book about it. But it's funny because I don't see myself as being that brave. It's almost like it's a different person, like that girl over there. So like, for example, when I finished the manuscript and I had to send it to the publisher, I read it through one last time. I think it took me 4 hours and I just sat back and I was like, oh, that poor girl. I feel for her. Like it wasn't me. I disassociated from who I was to who she was.
Like a little bit of cognitive dissonance. I like that. And I think probably you need that. But then it came out and people were responding. So you kind of have to.
Don't it?
Yeah, that's a lot. Are you having people in your group, men, saying things like this, being more vocal about it in even their personal lives based on, your example of bravery? And I know you don't, I'm sorry if it's making you feel uncomfortable because I know you
that's fine.
Consider yourself this brave person, but you have to, but you are. And I feel like we have to let women know when we find them brave and we admire them because we've got a lot of talk in our heads and there's a lot of matter. There are a lot of floors with cornflakes on them. And I think it's, you should know that was very brave of you. And not only are you physically brave, because I feel like we didn't mention this at all. You actually went back for a second child. You actually had another baby after this experience and they're both wonderful. But so you're not just, but you're physically brave, but you also were brave with your vulnerability and your willingness to share. So thank you.
That is one of the biggest questions I get asked by women who have their prolapse on their first birth is like, how did you go and have another baby? What were the mechanics of even falling pregnant? All of those things. And I've done a lot of one-on-one coaching sessions for that privately, just because not everyone is comfortable to talk about it in a group setting. I've written articles, we've got podcast episodes on it that explains the whole thing. So you don't have to buy the book to read the book to find that out. So if anyone's listening and they really want to find out how to have a second baby, there was a process that I educated myself every minute of the day. I think my whole pregnancy, I was reading, digesting content, talking to so many people, midwives. Oh, one last thing I think it's important to add with that multifaceted layer of why we're not getting further down the road is also with the gender issue between doctors and midwives. I learnt the power play that happens behind the scenes that we, the patients, don't see. The treatment from men in birthing suites to female midwives is immense. And I was very grateful that I had midwives open up and share this with me so I understood the misogyny that happens in medical field, because I had no idea. That is a huge thing that will need to shift for childbirth. Again, they're pitted against each other. That when they work together, amazing outcomes can happen. But the power play between men and women is still very prominent. And I was shocked and saddened to know that.
It is, because it's like you feel like it's the most, it could be such an empowering experience to have a baby. And there's no place for that type of dynamics in that room. There's no room for ego. You're welcome. This is my dog. Pardon me for just 1 second. He's not going to stop. Hold on 1 second. So Stephanie, I want to get back to your transition though. Now, started off as an educator. You switched into basically a total advocate and activist, really, for birthing in Australia. But now you've shifted again. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What started it and why you've decided to do it? Besides what you mentioned about kind of carrying that mental weight of everybody's story, because I think that would be a lot and could kind of be a good impetus to shift. But why did you go in the direction that you're in?
I think because ultimately I still love teaching. And I think like any household, having the ability to have more than one income is important with children when you have goals. And going from 6 figures to 0 was really difficult for everyone.
A lot of less figures, yes.
It was a life adjustment. But then I found this passion for podcasting. So while I was doing it, I would leave an interview and I would be really lit up. My whole body would be alive. And I'm like, I love this. I love talking. And I was like, this makes sense. All my school reports when I was little was like, Stephanie talks too much. Stephanie talks too much. I was there for the social. So I think just being able to continue conversations, but then I was having people, it actually all started with someone reached out to me. She was a friend and she said, I'm starting a podcast. How did you get to work with Huggies, I think it was? And I said, oh, you just do this. And I just rattled it off. And she's like, oh, that sounds easy. Will you help me? I'm like, okay, fine. And then the next person come along, I am going to be launching a book. I have no funds. How do I crowdsource or crowdfund? And I was like, oh, you can partner and you could do this, this, and this. And then it's kind of like she was born. I just love helping people. I ended up being like the Cupid, like the connector between the brand and the podcaster, or the brand and the author. And so you have so much to offer them. They have what you need, you have what they need. Do a swap. It all came from a place of necessity when I had no money to pay my producer. So I had to partner with the right brands that made sense to my audience, that they were getting a value, I was getting supported, the brand was getting supported. So I always look at it as like a win-win-win for everyone. And it just made sense. It goes beyond an ad read. So people are like, oh, I loved that show until they have 5 ads and it was really annoying. Very strategically, I used all of my background in education to make sure that the experience for the listener was the best it could possibly be, which would include just talking about one brand at a time. if there was something, and it had to be helpful to women living with prolapse. For example, period underpants. A lot of women with prolapse can no longer keep a tampon in.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So the evolution of period underwear made sense because pads are uncomfortable. They make you feel like you're a teenager, all the things, not sustainable. So working with them made sense to my audience. It made sense to me, and it made sense to the brand. That's just where it came from. And then all of a sudden it's like popcorn. And then this person and then that person and that person needed help. So Podcast Expert Lab was born because I was also helping people launch their podcast. All of the prep work, the launch plan, how to find a partner. I just love it. And I can do it sitting at home. So physically, while I can't do my education job, I can manage this at home when I can, depending on my body, all of those things. So that flexibility is there.
And do you work with, you show people how to work values aligned, like how to find people that have their same values. Do you also, I'm guessing you get, you have the luxury, I want to say, because you really know your stuff, of being a little bit choosy about who you choose to work with. I mean, I guess you're not going to be, we're not going to like, yes, you don't, you know what
it
I'm
needs
saying?
to.
Yes.
Yeah. In the beginning, I was just happy to help anyone. But then some people who were coming through, I wasn't values aligned with their show. So what they were talking about, I was like, yeah, good for you, but good luck. Because they were in it for the wrong reasons. They were in it just to monetize. I want people with more of a purpose and a passion who are there to help others. So it needs to be more purpose driven, and businesses can do that too. Don't get me wrong. I've worked with some business owners who have a mission to really support people. I'm happy to help those people every day, all day.
I love how, and I don't want to be like make lemonade from lemons, because it's all part of your story and your evolution. And I like how you have got like chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're like to describe the different kind of how you see the sections of your life, but there's really such a through line, I mean, you have just been just evolving and doing these things. And it's awesome to see what you've kind of created post this experience, because it's something, I mean, and everybody should know, prior to us hitting record 62 times because of the dog barking, you were giving me tips even now that are so helpful. So if anybody is thinking about doing a podcast, you want to reach out to Stephanie. And if the last thing, because I don't want to keep you any longer, you've been so generous with your time. If you could envision just one big shift in how women's health stories are treated in the next 5 years, what would you hope that is?
Oh, I love this. That we are having conversations, and I would say I'm already doing it. For example, my daughter is 9 turning 10. She knows what her vagina is, her vulva. She knows her pelvic floor. She knows she can't be constipated and sit on a toilet and push. I've taught her how to, it's called moo poo, how to, if she is constipated, because kids eat candy and sugar, how to not push and strain. Straining is the worst. So from a child at 10, she knows all of this. The conversation's already started. So that 5-year plan is in action for the next 5 years, just as we did with breast cancer. So in the media, the word breast wasn't allowed to be spoken about up until we got cancer in them. And then we're allowed to say breast cancer. Like, ridiculous.
Laughing, but it's so true.
In the next 5 years, I want us to be talking about pelvic organ prolapse in the same way. So even in that femtech space, there's a huge gap when it comes to prolapse. Women's Health Week, they often they talk about menopause, perimenopause, and all the things. Prolapse is not given a spotlight. But it really needs not.
There's and especially knowing how common it is. I mean, it's one thing. There are always going to be, what they call the orphan diseases, where there's only 1,000 people in the whole world, and that's absolutely terrible. And I hope we study them but it's going to be it's just going to drive less of the conversation because it affects less people. When you're saying 1 in 2 women, and women outnumber men on the planet, there are 51% more women than you're 51% women, 49%.
Yes.
How are we not discussing this? That's
exactly
25% of the population for sure is having a problem.
In the next 5 years, I would like, and I know that by the way, full disclosure, I'm not championing this. I was not the first person to do this. In the US, Sherry Palm, all hat tip to her. She's got a foundation called APOPS, the American Association of Pelvic Organ Prolapse. She's been banging this drum for decades. I want to see her get to the point where it's in mainstream media. She's the best person who talks to this. She lives and breathes this. She also has a support group, and we've worked together on a couple of things, but I want to see her really make that massive dent she's been working so hard at. The second thing is pessaries are finally evolving. Like, hallelujah. A team of young engineer women, I've met them multiple times in the US, have created a new pessary that actually works. Pessaries hadn't changed. They used to be pomegranates and potatoes. Like, women used to use them. This is how long this has been going on. This is not a new thing.
Right. In fact, that's just even more proof. It's been around forever and there's nothing happening to make it better.
So young women, female engineers like that, who are creating these new pessaries, getting them to market, need spotlight. Sherry, them, like all the pieces of the puzzle are just sitting in the peripheral, and we need to bring it together with a massive bang. So I want everyone to know what a prolapse is, how to prevent it, how to treat it, how to manage living with it, all of the things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing on behalf of all women, and also for educating me on it, for anybody who's buying your book. I mean, even getting it from the library if they want to. It's just invaluable information for anybody who's got a uterus and who wants to kind of be informed if they're going in. I mean, I'm done having babies, so that part's not going to happen, but I have a daughter, I have a son. I don't know what's going to happen in their lives. And I think it's best to just be informed. And also thank you for being a role model to other young women, because it takes enough people being brave about the same subject before everybody, it took one person over here saying breast. They were whispering it, saying their code words. And finally, everybody just talks about their breasts. In fact,
it's a movement.
I interviewed a friend of mine. She's got a project called the Fondle Project. And, it could sound very like edgy and illicit, but it's for breast cancer awareness. And that's how she's helping to do her part to bring it to the table. But this kind of language just wouldn't have flown even 15, 20 years ago, So
funny story to finish.
Tell me.
So the reason I went down the self-publishing route is because the publishing houses wanted to remove the word vagina from my front cover. And I was like, hell no. You can't say the day my pelvic floor broke. Everyone's like, what? Who cares about that? No one cares about that. The day my vagina broke it's shocking. And then you need to be shocked to find out more. Like, I want people to be like, oh my God, what is that? I need to know. And then go and find out and be educated. And I love that you brought up for your son, because yes, I have a daughter, but I also have a son who this is just as important for, because at some point in his life, he's going to be caring for his mummy, his sister, his partner, potentially whoever in his life. He also needs to know about this.
Absolutely.
So we teach him too.
Beats the perimenopause drum.
Yeah.
He's like, Mom, if you blame one more thing on perimenopause, and I'm like, no, really, it is. It's all the things. It's all tied together. But thank you so much for your time. And thank you for being so gracious about the interruptions. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Roar. Huge thanks to my guest, Steph Thompson, for joining me and for the powerful work she's done to help women step into their full selves. Next week, we're diving into something a little more mystical, but every bit as grounded, with Sharon Kenny Rudy, the transformational coach and intuitive guide behind TigerPriestess.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review. It really helps Roar reach more people who need these stories. And if you want to stay connected between episodes, head to danielledavies.com to sign up for my newsletter dispatches. You'll find links there to past guests, show updates, and even some Roar merch. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.